They forced her to her knees. Nia Adeyemi lowered her head just enough to look defeated. Just enough to look harmless. Around her, men laughed. The kind of careless laughter that came from people who believed they were in control. Nia didn't react. Didn't argue. Didn't resist. Because every second inside this room was exactly where her mission needed her to be. Then the door opened. The laughter died instantly. Heavy footsteps crossed the marble floor. Slow. Deliberate. Dangerous. Park Jihyuk stopped a few feet away. His cold eyes lifted to her face. And for the first time in years, the untouchable Mafia boss went completely still. Like he had just seen someone he was never supposed to see again. And in that moment, Nia knew her mission had just become far more dangerous. In Seoul's criminal underworld, Park Jihyuk was more than powerful. He was inevitable. Men feared his silence more than other bosses' threats. Enemies disappeared before they even realized they had made a mistake. For nearly a decade, no one had slipped past his instincts. Until Nia Adeyemi walked into his empire under a name that wasn't hers. And a mission that could get her killed. Officially, she was just another recruit pulled into the organization's lower ranks. Quiet. Observant. Forgettable. Exactly how she wanted it. But behind Nia's calm expression was a history carefully buried. One connected to a rainy night years ago. And to the one man now watching her far too closely. Because Park Jihyuk wasn't just suspicious. He was remembering. And if he ever confirmed the truth, this mission wouldn't end with quiet betrayal. It would end in blood. The room was cold enough to keep people alert and obedient. Nia Adeyemi sat across the steel table, hands loosely folded, posture relaxed in a way that made most people underestimate her. On the wall behind the agency director, multiple surveillance photos flickered across the screen. At the center of them all was one man, Park Jihyuk. Even in still images, his presence was unmistakable. Sharp suit, unreadable eyes. The quiet authority of someone who never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Target is confirmed active in Seoul's eastern sector, the director said, voice clipped. You will infiltrate his organization through the lower recruitment channels. No direct contact unless necessary. Nia's gaze lingered on Jihyuk's photo for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked away. Controlled. Professional. In touch. What's the success window? She asked calmly. 8 weeks, the director replied. Maximum. A thin silence followed. Then the warning came. You should understand something before you accept this assignment, Agent Adeyemi. The director leaned forward slightly. Every operative we've placed near Park Jihyuk has either disappeared or been found too late to talk. The screen shifted. Case files. Red markers. Closed investigations. Nia's expression didn't change. Inside, her pulse remained slow and even, the steady rhythm of someone who had long ago learned how to function inside danger. I'm aware of his reputation, she said quietly. The director studied her for a moment longer, like he was trying to find a crack in her composure. He didn't. Your objective is intelligence extraction and structural mapping of his network, he continued. You are not there to engage him emotionally. You are not there to improvise. Was, then more pointed. And you are definitely not there to get noticed. For the first time, something flickered deep in Nia's eyes. Not fear. Memory. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I won't be, she said. The director gave a slow nod, though something about his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Your cover identity has already been seeded into their recruitment pipeline. You deploy in 48 hours. The meeting ended just like that. Clean. Clinical. Final. But as Nia stood and turned toward the exit, her gaze drifted once more to the frozen image of Park Jihyuk. For a fraction of a second, her fingers curled slightly at her side. Then she walked out, composed as ever. Across the city, deep inside a secured office lined with dark glass and silence, a notification quietly appeared on a private terminal. Routine background sweep. New recruit intake. Nothing unusual, until the system paused. Highlighted. Zoomed. Park Jihyuk's most trusted analyst frowned slightly as a file photo sharpened on the screen. Woman. Dark eyes. Calm expression. The analyst leaned closer. Something about her face. His fingers slowly stilled over the keyboard. Boss might want to see this. And without hesitation, Nia Adeyemi's file was flagged for priority review. The building didn't look like the center of a criminal empire. That was the first thing Nia Adeyemi noticed. No flashing signs. No obvious guards at the front entrance. Just a sleek glass tower standing quietly against Seoul's gray afternoon sky. The kind of place corporate executives walked into every morning without a second thought. Which meant it was exactly the kind of place Park Jihyuk would choose. Nia stepped through the revolving doors with measured calm. Her expression neutral, her breathing steady. Inside, the air was cool and controlled, carrying that faint, expensive scent of polished marble and money that never needed to announce itself. Everything here was quiet. Too quiet. Eyes followed her anyway. Not openly. Jihyuk's organization was far more disciplined than that, but she felt it. The subtle shifts. The brief pauses in conversation. The way people instinctively noted new faces. But let them see a recruit. Let them underestimate her. At the reception checkpoint, her temporary credentials were scanned, stamped, and returned without comment. The woman behind the desk didn't even look impressed, just efficient and detached. "You're assigned to lower operations," she said flatly. "Orientation room, level 3. Nia gave a small nod and moved on. Level 3 was colder. Not in temperature, in atmosphere. The deeper she walked into the building, the heavier the silence became. Conversations dropped when certain doors opened. Footsteps echoed just a little too sharply against the floors. Even the air felt watched. This was how power operated here. Invisible. Constant. Unforgiving. Nia kept her pace even as she entered the orientation room with a handful of other new recruits. Some looked nervous. One looked overly confident. The dangerous kind of arrogance that didn't last long in places like this. She took a seat near the end of the row, posture relaxed, gaze lowered just enough to appear compliant. Then the door opened again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the entire room changed. The shift was instant, subtle but absolute. Spines straightened. Conversations died mid-breath. Even the overly confident recruit beside her went very, very still. Nia didn't need to look up to know why. But she did anyway. Park Jihyuk stood in the doorway, dressed in black so precise it looked effortless. His expression was the same as in the photos. Calm, unreadable, controlled to a level that bordered on dangerous. His gaze moved slowly across the room, measuring, weighing, dismissing, until it reached her. For the briefest second, so fast most people would have missed it. His eyes sharpened. Not surprise. Not recognition. But something close to focus. Nia held her breathing steady and lowered her gaze half a second later. Exactly how a cautious new recruit should. Nothing more. Nothing suspicious. Just another face in the room. The silence stretched. Then Jihyuk turned slightly toward the man standing behind him. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough that only the closest ears would catch it. "Watch her." Silence followed Park Jihyuk wherever he went. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind that pressed down on a room until even breathing felt like a risk. By the time he reached the executive floor, the entire corridor had cleared without a single order being given. Staff members who had been moving moments ago suddenly found urgent reasons to be somewhere else. Doors closed softly. Footsteps faded. Power, in Jihyuk's world, did not need to announce itself. It was simply understood. He entered his office without looking back. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the gray Seoul skyline, but his attention wasn't on the city. His jacket came off in one smooth motion, draped precisely over the chair. Every movement controlled. Economical. Predictable. Except for the way his thoughts kept circling back to one face. Downstairs. dark eyes that had been far too steady for a new recruit. His aide stepped in quietly behind him. "The flagged file is ready, sir." Jihyuk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved to the desk and rested his fingers lightly against the polished surface, gaze distant for just a fraction too long. "Bring it up." The screen lit. Personnel file opened. Name, Nia Adeyemi. Background. Cover credentials. Clean. Clean. Jihyuk's expression didn't change, but the air in the room shifted. Subtle, dangerous. The kind of shift his aide had learned to recognize over the years. Something had caught his attention. His eyes moved slowly to the attached photo. And stop. For the first time since entering the room. He went completely still. Vain. Cold pavement. Headlights cutting through the dark. The memory came without warning, sharp and unwelcome. Years ago. A younger version of himself. Blood on his sleeve, vision blurring at the edges. The night had been chaos and gunfire and betrayal. And through the storm, a woman's silhouette kneeling beside him. Steady hands. Voice. Dark eyes that met his without fear. He had searched for her afterward. For months. Found nothing. Till now. Back in the present, Jihyuk's fingers curled slowly against the desk. His aide shifted slightly, uneasy. "Sir." Jihyuk didn't look away from the screen. Didn't blink. Didn't move. But when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. Controlled but edged with something unfamiliar. Recognition. "Nia." By evening, the air inside the lower operations wing had grown even colder. Nia Adeyemi moved with the quiet efficiency expected of new recruits. Observant, unobtrusive, careful not to draw attention. Files were sorted. Instructions followed. Questions kept to a minimum. On the surface, she was exactly what her cover said she was. Forgettable. But the weight of a certain pair of eyes lingered at the back of her awareness. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. When the summons came, it wasn't loud. Just a quiet message delivered by one of the floor supervisors. "The boss wants to see you." Around her, the room went still for half a breath. Nia rose smoothly to her feet. No hesitation. No visible reaction. Inside, her pulse remained slow and disciplined. But something deeper, something older had begun to stir. She followed the escort through a private elevator and into a part of the building few recruits ever saw. The lighting here was softer. The silence heavier. Power lived in these walls. The office doors opened. Park Jihyuk stood near the window, Seoul's night skyline stretching behind him like a living backdrop. He didn't turn immediately when she entered. Controlled. Deliberate. "Close the door," he said. Nia obeyed. The soft click echoed far louder than it should have. Only then did he face her. Up close, his presence was sharper. Not loud, not aggressive, but precise in a way that made most people instinctively step back. Nia didn't. She lowered her gaze respectfully. Just enough to play her role. "You asked to see me, sir." Her voice was calm. Professional. Carefully neutral. Jihyuk studied her in silence that stretched just a second too long. "You're new," he said. "Yes, sir." Background checks came back clean. A simple statement. But it didn't feel like approval. Felt like pressure. Nia kept her expression composed. "I try to keep my work that way." For the briefest moment, something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or suspicion. He took one slow step closer. Close enough now that the space between them felt intentional. "Dangerous." "You've been in Seoul long?" he asked. "Not long enough to know my way around properly." The answer came easily. Too easily. Silence settled again. Heavy. Testing. Jihyuk's gaze moved. Not over her face this time, but lower. To her hands. Still at her sides. Still controlled. But his eyes sharpened slightly. Because there, just barely visible along the inside of her wrist, was a thin, faded scar. Precise. Exactly where he remembered it. The room seemed to tighten around them. And for the first time since she walked in, Park Jihyuk's expression shifted. Just a fraction. But enough to change everything. The shift in the room didn't go unnoticed. By the time Nia Adeyemi returned to lower operations, the air around her had changed. Subtle, but sharp enough for trained instincts to catch. Conversations paused half a second too long when she passed. One of the senior floor enforcers watched her with open curiosity now. And across the room, someone else was watching with something far more dangerous. Kang Doyan didn't bother hiding his suspicion. He leaned against the edge of a desk, arms folded, eyes tracking her every movement with the slow patience of a man who enjoyed finding weaknesses. Unlike the others, he didn't look intimidated by her calm. He looked interested. Nia kept her focus on the files in front of her, movements precise, breathing steady. But inside, her awareness sharpened. Predators recognized patterns. And Doyan was already circling. "You're new," he said finally, voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby workers. Not a question. Probe. Nia looked up slowly, meeting his gaze with careful neutrality. "I started this week." His lips curved faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Funny," he murmured. "Boss doesn't usually take interest in new recruits." A few heads turned. The room tightened. Nia let exactly 1 second pass, just enough to appear confused, not defensive. "I wouldn't know anything about that." It was the right answer. But Doyan stepped closer anyway. Too close. His eyes flicked briefly to her wrist, to the scar. Something dark flickered across his expression. And just like that, the tension spiked. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. Around them, the room had gone almost completely silent. One wrong word. One wrong reaction. Nia could feel the edge of exposure pressing in. She tilted her head slightly, as if mildly puzzled. "Got what?" Doyan's hand moved, not touching but hovering near her wrist now, testing boundaries. "You know exactly what I..." "Enough." The single word cut through the room like a blade. Every spine snapped straight. Doyan's hand dropped instantly. Park Jihyuk stood at the entrance of the operations floor, expression calm, eyes cold in a way that made even seasoned men step back without thinking. His gaze moved once across the room, and settled. "Doyan, is there a problem?" Jihyuk asked quietly. Doyan recovered quickly, but the brief flicker of irritation in his eyes didn't go unnoticed. "Just routine curiosity, boss." Silence stretched. Then Jihyuk spoke again, voice smooth, final. "She's cleared." 2 words. Absolute authority. The tension broke instantly. Doyan stepped back, jaw tight but obedient. "Understood." Around the room, people returned to work, but the shift in energy remained. Because everyone had just seen it. The boss had intervened. For her. Nia lowered her gaze again, hiding the sharp calculation behind her calm expression. This mission had just become far more complicated. "If you were Nia, would you trust him or start planning your exit now?" The message came just before midnight. Not through the public channels. Not through the usual chain of command. Private. Direct. Report to executive level. Lone. Nia Adeyemi stared at the screen for exactly 3 seconds before locking her phone and rising smoothly from her seat. Around her, the night shift hummed with low activity, but she could already feel it. Pull. The moment she had been carefully circling since the day she walked into this building. She took the private elevator up. The ride was silent. Too quiet. When the doors opened, Park Jihyuk was already waiting. He stood near the window again, city lights reflecting faintly across the glass behind him. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing casual about the air in the room. Felt sharpened, prepared. The door closed softly behind her. This time he didn't make her wait. "You're very controlled," Jihyuk said. Not a greeting, not an accusation, an observation. Nia inclined her head slightly. It helps in unfamiliar environments. His gaze held hers now, steady, precise, searching for fractures most people didn't even know they had. "For most recruits," he said quietly, This place is overwhelming. Small pause. You don't look overwhelmed. Careful. Very careful. I adapt quickly, Nia replied. Silence stretched between them. Then Jihyuk moved. One slow step closer. Close enough now that the tension between them felt almost physical. You were in Busan, he said suddenly. Not asked. Stated. Nia's pulse didn't spike, but deep inside something cold slid into place. I've traveled, she said evenly. His eyes didn't leave her face. Rainstorm. 8 years ago. His voice dropped slightly, quieter now. Warehouse district. The air in the room shifted. Just a fraction. But enough. 'Cause now there was no doubt. He remembered. Nia held his gaze. Calm, composed, giving him nothing. But Jihyuk's expression had already changed. Not softer. Not warmer. Just certain. I spent months looking for the woman who walked away that night, he said. The words landed slowly. Deliberately. And now, his eyes sharpened slightly. She walks into my organization under a false name. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Nia didn't reach for an excuse. Didn't panic. Didn't break. Because they both understood something now. The game had shifted. Jihyuk's hand moved to the tablet on his desk. With one smooth motion, he turned the screen toward her. Her agency file stared back. Red classified markings. Deep cover clearance. Proof. Absolute and undeniable. You're good, he said quietly. Most people wouldn't have made it this far. Still no alarm. No guards rushing in. No exposure. Instead, he stepped even closer, voice dropping to something low and controlled and far more dangerous than anger. If you came to destroy me, he said softly, then stay where I can see you. By morning, the building was already buzzing with quiet tension. Word didn't travel openly in Park Jihyuk's organization, but it moved. In glances. In lowered voices. In the subtle way people now looked at Nia Adeyemi just a second longer than before. The boss had kept her. That alone was enough to change the temperature around her. Nia moved through lower operations with her usual calm, but inside, her awareness was razor-sharp. Jihyuk's warning from the night before still lingered in her mind, not as a threat, but as something far more complicated. He knew. And yet, he had closed ranks instead of exposing her, which meant the game had changed for both of them. The shift came just before noon. A logistics alert triggered across the operations floor. One of the shipment routes had gone dark. Internal chatter rose quickly, sharp with urgency. Greens flickered. Supervisors barked quiet orders. Then Kong Doyen's voice cut through the tension. System breach, he said coolly, already stepping forward like a man eager to take control. His gaze slid briefly toward Nia. Unless someone here wants to explain why our routing just collapsed. It wasn't subtle. Several heads turned her way. Testing. Waiting. Nia didn't react to the bait. Instead, she stepped toward the central terminal, movements smooth and unhurried. Permission to check the trace? She asked calmly. Doyen's mouth tilted faintly. Be my guest. The unspoken message was clear. Go ahead. Fail publicly. Nia's fingers moved across the keyboard with quiet precision. Lines of code scrolled rapidly. Her expression focused but composed. Within seconds, the room's background noise began to thin. 30 seconds. 40. There, she said softly. The main screen shifted. The supposed breach wasn't external. It was internal rerouting interference. Sloppy but deliberate. Murmurs rippled through the room. Nia leaned back slightly. Your system didn't collapse. Someone tried to mask a manual diversion. Silence dropped hard. Doyen's expression tightened. Just slightly. Nia's gaze lifted, calm and clear. And if I'm reading this correctly? She tapped one final key. A user ID flashed onto the main screen. Doyen's. The room froze. For the first time since she'd arrived, the balance tilted. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. Doyen straightened slowly, jaw tight. You're implying I'm stating what the system shows, Nia replied evenly. Before the tension could snap, another presence entered the floor. Park Jihyuk. The silence that followed was absolute. His gaze moved once across the screen, then to Doyen, then finally to Nia. Measured, unreadable, but the decision came quickly. Good work, he said. 2 quiet words. But in this room they carried weight. Respect shifted instantly. Doyen stepped back, the humiliation subtle but sharp enough for everyone to feel. Nia lowered her gaze again, composed as ever, but when she risked the briefest glance toward Jihyuk, his eyes were already on her. Not suspicious now. Not distant. Something deeper had settled there. And for the first time since this mission began, the danger between them no longer felt one-sided. Rain started just after midnight, soft at first, then steady. Nia Adeyemi stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the executive lounge, watching the water streak down the glass in thin silver lines. Seoul at night was all light and motion, but up here everything felt strangely still. Too still. She didn't turn when the door opened behind her. She didn't need to. Park Jihyuk's presence had a way of changing the air before he even spoke. You like the rain, he said quietly. Not a question. Nia's gaze remained on the city. It's familiar. Soft pause. Footsteps approached, slow, measured, until he stopped a few feet behind her. Not crowding. Not distant. Deliberate. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. You didn't panic today, Jihyuk said finally. Most people would have. I wasn't most people, Nia replied. His reflection in the glass shifted slightly, his eyes fixed on her profile. No, he said softly. You never were. Something in the air tightened. Careful. Dangerous. Nia turned then, slowly, meeting his gaze fully for the first time since the night before. If you already know who I am, she said evenly, why haven't you exposed me? The question hung between them. Jihyuk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved past her toward the window, hands resting lightly against the glass as rain traced thin lines beyond his fingers. When I woke up that night, he said quietly, I was supposed to be dead. The words were calm, controlled, but something older moved beneath them. Everyone else ran, he continued. Everyone else chose survival. You didn't. The memory flickered between them. Rain-soaked pavement, distant sirens, blood on concrete. Nia's expression didn't break, but her breathing slowed just slightly. Jihyuk turned his head, looking at her fully now. I remembered your eyes, he said. Not afraid. Not desperate. His voice lowered. Just steady. The room felt smaller. Closer. I had people search for you for months, he admitted quietly. No name. No trail. Nothing. Controlled vulnerability, tight, contained, but real enough to shift the space between them. Nia held his gaze, her voice calm but softer now. And now you've found me. Yes. One word. Heavy. Complicated. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming harder against the glass. For a moment, neither of them moved. Nia's phone vibrated sharply in her pocket. The sound cut clean through the tension. Once. Persistent. Her pulse shifted, because she already knew what it was. Mission Control didn't call twice. Slowly, she pulled the phone free and glanced down. Encrypted message. Priority read. Her deadline had just been moved forward. And suddenly, time was running out. The message stayed on Nia's screen long after the vibration stopped. Mission deadline advanced. Execute or withdraw. No third option. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, relentless, like the night years ago that neither of them had fully escaped. Nia slowly lowered the phone. For the first time since this mission began, the path ahead wasn't clean. Across from her, Park Jihyuk hadn't moved. But his eyes had sharpened. You just received new orders, he said quietly. Not a question. Nia exhaled slowly, then met his gaze head-on. There was no point pretending now. Not with him. Yes. Silence stretched between them, heavy, calculating, honest in a way neither of them had planned. Jihyuk stepped closer, the city lights cutting sharp lines across his expression. "And?" he asked. It wasn't pressure. It was a test. Nia studied him for a long moment. The most feared man in Seoul. The man she was sent to dismantle from the inside. The man who, against all logic, had seen through her faster than anyone ever had. Carefully, she slipped the phone back into her pocket. "My orders haven't changed," she said evenly. Jihyuk's gaze darkened, not surprised but alert. Then Nia took one slow step forward, closing the distance just enough to shift the air between them. "But my strategy has," she finished. For the first time since she'd known him, something flickered clearly in his eyes. Interest. Dark. Dangerous. Alive. "Explain," he said. Nia's voice remained calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "You already know I could have walked away the moment you exposed me." "True. You didn't." "Also true." She held his gaze. "Because destroying your empire from the outside would take years." Beat of silence. But standing inside it. Her eyes sharpened slightly. "That changes the timeline." Understanding moved through Jihyuk's expression, slow and deliberate. Not anger. Not betrayal. Recognition. He was already calculating the same possibilities. The same risk. The same dangerous potential. "You're proposing an alliance," he said quietly. Nia didn't smile. But something in her posture shifted. Not submissive, not defiant. "Cool. Temporary," she said. "Strategic. Mutually beneficial." The rain softened slightly outside, the city lights blurring against the glass. For a long moment, Park Jihyuk said nothing. Then slowly, he extended his hand. Not as a boss, not as a captor, but as something far more dangerous. "Partner." Nia looked at it for exactly 1 second before placing her hand in his. Firm. Steady. Unshaken. Above them, thunder rolled faintly across the Seoul skyline. And somewhere deep beneath the silence, the balance of power quietly shifted. Because the woman sent to destroy the Mafia boss now stood beside the only man who had ever seen through her.